Jnantimidandasya Jnananjanatsalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Aya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatyate Satarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patithanam Bhavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Kopesha Kopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Deve Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahapadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauradveshe Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Very grateful to be with all of you this morning, Swamiji. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir-bhavati bharata abhyutanam dharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. That again and again throughout the ages, Bhagavan, the absolute truth, the one supreme cause of all causes, the all-beautiful, the supreme object of all love, descends into this world. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chaduskritam dharma samstapanaradaya sambhavami yuge yuge. To re-establish eternal universal spiritual principles, to annihilate ignorance, and ultimately to attract our hearts. The next verse in the 4th chapter of the Gita tells, Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti tattvata tyaktva deham punara janma naiti bhameti sorjuna. That anyone who understands the transcendental nature of my activities, my birth, My teachings never takes birth in this material world, but attains the supreme abode. In this verse, divyam means transcendental, means when the Lord takes birth in this world, it is a completely spiritual experience that transcends all the limitations of what's possible and what's impossible within creation. Sometimes when people hear these stories from the Puranas, from the Vedas, from other great scriptures, we think, how is that possible? How could Bhagavan do that? But we see the Lord doing impossible things at every moment. Just out a few minutes walk on the beautiful ocean side, the sun is rising. That's quite incredible, is it not? Neither you nor the great industrialists or scientists or anyone can create millions of times. We can't create microphones like this.
One second, I'll just move it over.
Thank you, thank you. But isn't the sun incredible? The electricity for this microphone, its origin in the creation is the sun. The sun is investing its energy in the trees. The trees go underground, and that same energy is stored and becomes coal. It goes deeper and it becomes oil. It's all the energy of the sun. The source of all electricity, the source of all light, the source of all heat. Wherever it is, whether it's direct or indirect, it's all coming from the sun. And it's rising. If we get a little too close, our little Earth planet, we burn. For a little too far, we freeze. Every tree has come from a tiny little seed this big. Now in Japan, they can make things real small. But could they put a redwood tree in a seed this big? This is what we see at every time, every moment within creation. The song of a bird. Who taught the bird music? They're just born. They don't take aviation lessons. They just know how to fly. How is that? And they know how to make nests. And they know what to eat. And they know how to sing. Miracles everywhere. We look at all the stars. What is this little universe we're living in? And we see what man could do, or women. We could build cities. Where do we... Krishna tells in Gita, I'm the ability in man, the intelligence of the intelligence, the strength of the strong. So when that absolute truth descends to this world, it's going to do something special. Not just going to be like the rest of us. Everything is possible. Nothing is impossible. The more we actually grasp this, understand this, and realize this, the more, instead of thinking, how could that happen? Is that not just mythology? When we hear these stories, our love simply grows. And our happiness grows with it. So simply by hearing and understanding the transcendental nature of the Lord's birth and activities in this world awakens that dormant love that is within our heart. And that love is eternal. It is beyond birth. It is beyond death. It is our true essence. I'd like to explain the appearance or the birth of Sri Chaitanya briefly. There are many biographers of Sri Chaitanya's life. Some of them were his direct associates who eyewitnessed everything, like Murari Gupta, Swarup Damodar Goswami. And then there was Vrindavan Das Thakur, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Lochan Das Thakur. And these writings have such deep philosophical purport and such beautiful, beautiful historical narrations. So we begin with the scene of India, especially West Bengal at that time, just prior to 1486. We were describing yesterday, there was such a deep divide between castes. And people, because they were born in a certain family, claimed proprietorship over the right to spirituality and to liberation. And instead of taking the responsibility for what they had to enlighten people, they exploited people. In the town of Navadvip, it was the high seat of learning. Hundreds and thousands of people were coming from all over India to learn there. They would become masters at the various systems of the Vedic knowledge. And at that time, the greatest sport was debate. If you take basketball, baseball, football, soccer, hockey, cricket, put them all together, and you don't get the prestige of being a champion debater. People had such mind, such intellect, but yet there was no talk of devotion. There was no talk of transcendental subjects. It was all knowledge for the sake of prestige. And people, the more they learned, the more they were becoming arrogant and condescending toward others, which is actually the opposite of what the knowledge is supposed to do to you. Transcendental knowledge is supposed to make us, it's supposed to liberate us from the ahankar, the false ego. It's not supposed to infatuate the false ego. Transcendental knowledge is meant to give us the understanding of how to see the essence of every living being, a part of God, our brothers, our sisters, and to love, not to exploit, to hate. Spiritual knowledge is meant to transform us from material to spiritual. It's not meant to simply increase the bondage of our material ego and lifestyle, but that's exactly what it was doing. At that time, there were some very, very great devotees, like Srivas, Sri Ram, Sripati, Srinidhi. They were brothers, and they were living in a little house. And they saw the situation, and they were thinking, in this age of Kali, according to the scriptures, Krishna is supposed to appear, to establish this Yuga Dharma of chanting the holy names, to rise everybody above this ignorance and illusion and ego, to give everyone the opportunity for the highest perfection, prema bhakti. So they themselves were doing kirtan practically day and night, praying for the Lord to come. And then there was Sri Advaita, who you were singing about before, and Haridas. This is a very special message. Sri Advaita was the topmost leader of the entire Brahmin priestly community. All these Brahmins who had the tendency of arrogance and exploitation and feeling themselves to have monopoly. You serve me if you want to become pious. Advaita was the most learned, the most esteemed in every way. And he made his very, very best intimate friend Haridas. Later on in this narration, and another day, we're going to speak in detail about Haridas Thakur. He was born, according to the standards of society then, in an untouchable family called Malecha Yavana. He was born of another religion altogether. He was born of a family of people who didn't believe in the Vedic scriptures. They were meat eaters, and they were low caste by Brahminical standard. And in those days, and I've even seen it in these days in some places, where if someone like Haridas walks by you, this, I'm speaking literally, it's like this in some Orthodox families, and it was practically all pervading in the Orthodox families in those days. If an untouchable walks by your house and their shadow touches your house, then you have to clean the entire house with cow dung to purify it. And everybody has to wash their clothes and bathe in a river. Otherwise, it's polluted. That's just one example out of so many of the divisions of people on the basis of birth. And Haridas was from that family. And Advaita was the most highly esteemed Brahmin. But Advaita made Haridas his dearest, most best friend. They would meet every day. In fact, there was something called the Shraddha Patra. On the anniversary of a deceased forefather, usually your father or mother, there's a certain ceremony called Shraddha that is customary to do, especially among Brahmins. And you invite all the most qualified Brahmins to come, and you honor one by giving him the first honors of prasad. So here, when Advaita does Shraddha, everybody comes. Greatest scholars, greatest priests, most orthodoxy, they all came. What an honor just to be invited. And right in front of all of them, as at the culmination of the ceremony, they were all waiting. Who among us is going to be honored as the leader? And Advaita gave the honor to Haridas Thakur, who was living in a cave on the riverbank of the Ganga. That was shocking. Advaita and Haridas, they were chanting kirtan practically day and night with tears of love from their eyes, begging, Krishna, please descend into this world. We cannot tolerate seeing all this illusion and ignorance and people fighting over such trivial things. You see, great souls, according to Sanskrit, are called paradukatuki. That means that the suffering of somebody else is my suffering. And the happiness of someone else is my happiness. This is such a rare divine quality. It means we have no envy in our minds. Krishna tells Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, you can understand this message because you have no envy. To actually be Suhridam Sarvabhutanam, to be the well-wisher for everyone. So Haridas and Advaita, they were liberated souls. We'll discuss how they were liberated another day. They were constantly tasting the sweet nectar of prema bhakti, divine love. But they were not happy. They were beyond happiness. They were ananda. They were in ecstasy. But at the same time, their hearts suffered to see the plight of others, and they wanted to share that ecstasy. And they did everything that they could. But they were usually simply criticized and condemned. Only Krishna, only Bhagavan can help. So not for themselves, but for the world, they were all offering their prayers and their kirtan for the Lord to appear in this age of Kali. How many of you have learned what is Kali Yuga? Please raise your hands. Kali Yuga is an age that is predominated by quarrel and hypocrisy, where religion is taken to be irreligion and irreligion is taken to be religion. Where people, their minds and their senses are so weak to selfish enjoyment, given to selfish enjoyment, they're so spiritually weak. And there's a beautiful verse in the Srimad Bhagavat. Kalera dosa nide rajan asti eka mahan guna kirtanad eva krishnasya mukta sangha param braje. That this age of Kali is an ocean of faults. We see around us so much fighting over insignificant, irrelevant things. But if we don't have a higher, more meaningful experience in life, then irrelevant things become incredibly relevant. If we don't have that higher inner experience, then we become so caught up in things. It is said that in a spiritually healthy society, people use things and love people. But in a spiritually crippled society, people love things and use people to get things. Have any of you ever experienced that? It really, for a liberated, enlightened soul, it makes no sense. When I was walking along the seashore yesterday, there were some little children near that Atlantis making castles in the sand. And some of them were quite elaborate. I was quite amazed at the engineering, architectural design of some of these little children. They were getting cups and making domes on top of the castles that they were making and making molds. And they had little gates and tunnels. And the parents were watching. And the children were totally absorbed. And the more they put into it, the more they identify with it. And then as the evening was coming, the tide was rising. It was getting higher. And the little children were really trying to protect that little castle that they made. But then that one wave comes. And there was no castle. It was just land, flat. And the children were really disappointed. And the parents, they weren't disappointed. They were thinking a children's play. But I'll tell you, for enlightened beings, building cities like New York and Los Angeles and London and Tel Aviv and Bombay, it's all just castles in the sand. We're building our careers and we're making hundreds and thousands of dollars or millions of dollars or billions of dollars. What is it? We take it so seriously because we've forgotten the real treasure that's within ourself, the real meaning and purposeful experience of life. If we don't experience that within us, we're looking outside and we're building castle after castle after castle in our relationships and in so many things. But we were describing time. What is it? Time and tide. They wait for no person. See? So that wave is going to come. It may come in our life, but eventually it's going to come to end this present life. And everything's gone. And it's a tragedy for a childlike person attached to these things. Nashato vidite bhavo na bhavo vidite shata. The Gita explains, an intelligent person is one who sees the difference between the eternal and the temporary. And we connect ourselves deeply to the eternal, and we utilize the temporary for that purpose. That is bhakti. What is eternal in the bhakti school is our love for God, our compassion for all beings. And we take all this temporary manifestation and utilize it for that purpose. We see the divinity within everything because we see everything's connection to our beloved. So this is the state of Kali Yuga, where this is so forgotten, and people are so greedy and so arrogant and so envious, and there's so much depression because we just don't get what we want. And for slight provocation, there's divorce, there's gang wars, there's world wars. Simply due to a bankruptcy within. So these devotees, how could they be happy when they were seeing their brothers and sisters in this way? If we actually feel that everyone is our brother and sister, then we're a family. And in our family, even if we're happy and successful, if we see our beloved little sister or brother suffering, that moves us, doesn't it? That's the way saintly people see the world. They were crying and praying, Lord, come, give them your grace. And now I'm going to explain how Sri Chaitanya descended into this world. From a place called Bangladesh today, there is a city called Sylhet. In those days, it was Srihata. I've gone to these very places of these people. And Jagannath Mishra was a very, very pure-hearted, saintly person. And he came to Navadweep, this place in West Bengal, because it was the high seat of learning. And there he met a perfectly pure-hearted lady named Sachi Devi. And they were married. And somehow or other, because the Lord wanted to appear, invoked within their hearts such a deep desire to have a child. It wasn't just like an ordinary mother and father who naturally may want a child. It was the Paramatma, the Lord within the heart, who was inducing them to crave for a child because he wanted to appear through them. They had a little baby daughter, but just after she was born, she died, naturally. A year or two later, they had another daughter. Same thing happened. They had 8 consecutive daughters. Each one of them died in their infancy. They began to offer special worship, special puja, special chanting, and special vandanam prayers. You see, great things don't always come to this world easy. The Lord wants to show us that sometimes if we really want to be an instrument to do something great, there's obstacles we have to overcome. This is a universal spiritual principle. The Jewish race were slaves under the Pharaoh of Egypt. And God told Moses, "Let my people go. Tell the Pharaoh that." And gave him a stick, a transcendental stick. And it wasn't that easy. The Pharaoh wouldn't let him go. That's the way Kali is. That's the way Maya is. She's not going to let us go easy. We have to do something about it. He didn't give up. The Pharaoh would say, all right, and then he would change his mind, and then all these different incredible situations were created. And finally, when they did get let go, they had wandered, an entire generation had to live in the wilderness. Great things take a certain amount of dedication and sacrifice and faith. So finally they had a beautiful son who they named Vishwarup. And then Lord Krishna descended in a very transcendental way to enter the heart of Jagannath Mishra. Jagannath Mishra told Sachi, I had an incredible vision. I saw the light of the Lord enter into my heart, and then I saw that light of the Lord enter from my heart into your heart, and then into your womb. And Sachi said, I saw the exact same thing. And a few days later, she found that she was pregnant. And how she became so effulgent. She became the abode of the Lord. The child remained in the womb 9 months, 10 months, 11 months. And Sachi and Jagannath went to Sachi's father, Nilambar Chakravarti, who was a great astrologer and great learned person with mystic intuition. And he said, according to all my readings, this child is not ordinary. He's descending from the spiritual stratum. And he's waiting for the most auspicious time before he'll appear. Now this part of the story is very interesting because in India, an eclipse is considered the most inauspicious time. Orthodox people, what to speak of those days, in these days even, they won't eat during an eclipse because they consider it's contaminating to eat anything. Some people stay indoors and put all kinds of things on their windows because they don't want to be touched by the light comes from the eclipse. But in those days, everyone so much feared being contaminated by the eclipse of the moon that they would all go to the river Ganga, the Ganges, and they would chant God's names, chant the names of Hari, which is interesting, because they would never chant the names of Hari during the day or during the night or any time. Only when there was an emergency crisis, then they would naturally chant the names of Hari. So on this night of a lunar eclipse, which is considered very inauspicious, hundreds and thousands of people were either in the Ganges or on the banks of the Ganges chanting Hari to nullify the contamination, the bad luck. And when all the directions were filled with the names of Hari, Hari is a name of God, which means one who steals away all inauspiciousness from within us. That's why they chanted Hari. They wanted him to steal away all the inauspiciousness that was coming. And Advaita and Haridas and Srivas and all these devotees sing for the first time, everyone doing kirtan. They said, let this eclipse last forever. May it never end. It was during that moment when everyone was chanting God's names that Sri Chaitanya appeared within the world. He was born. He was waiting for the most auspicious moment. By material standards, it was the most inauspicious moment. But by spiritual standards, because the name of God was being chanted, it was the most auspicious moment. There's beautiful verse in Scripture, so many, that simply by chanting these sacred mantras, we transform all inauspiciousness into auspiciousness. By chanting these mantras with a sincere heart, we bring about infinite blessings. The Lord's mission was especially to promote, inaugurate this Nam Kirtan. And the Lord appeared during Nam Kirtan. He induced everyone. It wasn't even a scheduled eclipse. And when he was a little child, a little baby, he was so beautiful. He looked just like baby Krishna, except instead of having a dark blue complexion, he had a golden complexion, like molten gold. And it was so resplendent. From his little infancy, he had magnificent eyes that were so big, shaped like lotus petals. His nose was like a little sesame flower. His lips were bright red like bimba fruit. Every limb was soft and tender like fresh churned butter. People just couldn't stop looking at him. People wanted to touch him. Everyone wanted to hold him. And just by seeing him, all one's distress would disappear. Because Sri Chaitanya is the ultimate object of the Atma's love. But nobody knew who he was. They loved him as they love God, but they didn't know he was God. They just loved him. And as a little baby, he appeared extremely helpless. And sometimes he would cry. All the relatives and family members, they felt his happiness is our happiness, his suffering is our suffering. That's the nature of love. Everyone had love like a mother and father for him, whether they were his biological mother or father or not. That's how he was attracting their hearts. And he would cry. It would break their hearts. And whatever they would do, they couldn't get him to stop crying. And finally, in total desperation, they all came around and chanted the names of Hari. And as soon as they chanted Kirtan, he smiled. Such a beaming, radiant smile. It lit up their hearts. It lit up their lives. And this was happening so many times every day. He would cry, and then they knew the secret formula. They would all run together, the family members, the friends, the neighbors, and they would perform kirtan, and he would smile. And oh, there was nothing more precious to them than that smile. In this way, from his infancy, he was showing what his mission would be, to somehow or other induce people to taste the sweet joy of chanting the Lord's holy names. Nam namakari bahuta nija sarva shaktis. The Lord taught, Sri Chaitanya taught us that Bhagavan, the Absolute Truth, has many, many names. And in each of these names, the Lord's presence can be directly experienced. It's transcendental sound vibration. So, from 1, 2, 3 years old, he was inducing everyone around to taste the sweetness of love of God by chanting these names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. We will continue this evening. Thank you very much.